We've got a recap of last night's SmackDown, including the return of John Morrison and Robert Roode, and a major update for Becky Lynch's WWE contract.
Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Hello and welcome to the WrestleTalk News. I'm Chopper Pete Quinnell, and to start things off today, here is the 10th of January 2020 episode of Friday Night SmackDown in about 5 minutes. The show opened with Miz TV, which is a smart choice to immediately kick off with the most intriguing story from last week. Miz does a wonderful job of portraying the heel who thinks he's a babyface, hamming it up to the crowd, saying he had a bad day last week, and apologizing for his actions to Kofi last week. However, his apology is then immediately tainted because he explains exactly why it's okay for him to do it. I'm sorry, but... Miz then brings out John Morrison, and the pair go back and forth for a little bit before Morrison flips the switch and says he's disappointed in the audience. One bad day and the crowd are booing Miz after all the work he's done. Before Morrison goes too far with sounding off against the crowd, the New Day come out to interrupt, saying they don't buy Miz's apology and it wasn't respectful. Miz fires back saying that he respected Kofi's WWE title reign and the 6 seconds that it took him to lose it. Wait, someone said the wrong amount of seconds for Kofi's title loss. You know what that means? It's time for Kofi's correction class. Actually it was 8 seconds, not 6. No one cares, Kofi. It was still really quick and it sucked. This set up the rematch between Miz and Kofi, which was fun but didn't quite have the story drive as it did last week. Miz worked more and more heel in this match, eventually pushing Big E out the way when E was trying to check up on Kofi, to which Big E responded by getting up in Miz's face, which prompted Morrison to flip onto Big E. That's not an exaggeration. He just did a side flip and landed on him. This distraction allowed Miz to hit the skull-crushing finale on Kingston for the win, and Big E versus John Morrison is confirmed for next week. Backstage, Sonya and Mandy are getting geared up for Mandy's match later, and Mandy has a special box. Intriguing. Up next was a Firefly Funhouse, in which Bray says that at first the Fiend wanted Bryan to remember, with clips flashing up of Bryan's storyline with the Wyatt family. Then the Fiend wanted to change Bryan, with clips of him pulling out Bryan's hair. But now, he just wants to hurt him. This is honestly really intriguing, and I hope their match at Royal Rumble is distinctly different to any other Fiend match so far, with the Fiend just going ham with his offense instead of being passive and soaking up the hits. Elias did a song running down everyone at the Royal Rumble, especially Brock Lesnar, so Elias coming out at number 2 confirmed. Otis is backstage next, and Mandy comes up to him, hands him the box, apologizes for letting Ziggler stand on her cake, and Otis opens the box to reveal an I'm sorry cake. Mandy then runs off for her match. You can cut the tension with a knife! In said match, it was Mandy Rose versus Alexa Bliss, and while the match itself was perfectly average, the finish came about when it looked like Bliss was in control before Otis and Tucker came out, which allowed Mandy to roll up Bliss for the win. Otis then celebrated by eating the cake in the most Otis way possible. Lacey Evans was scheduled to face Sasha Banks next, but Sasha no-showed as she was finishing her rap album, to which the crowd chanted USA to show their disapproval of the Boston native. Lacey chased down Bayley, who had appeared on the Titantron, and the pair had a fairly underwhelming backstage brawl. Bryan is backstage with Caleb Braxton next, and he says he can beat the Fiend, and he's gonna do it for the Universal Championship. But suddenly, Ramblin Rabbit is on the screen behind Bryan, saying that the Fiend can be beaten. He has a secret, but before he can say the secret, Wyatt's hurt glove comes into frame and silences Ramblin Rabbit, to which Wyatt reminds everyone that snitches get stitches. This was lovely stuff, and if Wyatt does have some sort of weakness or vulnerability, it should make for an interesting matchup come Royal Rumble. What wasn't quite so interesting was Braun Strowman versus Shinsuke Nakamura, which was a match. It was fine, but a little boring at times. Despite the 3-on-1 disadvantage with Zayn and Cesaro on the outside, Strowman ducked a swing from the title Shinsuke was holding to hit the power slam for the win. Sheamus is back in a dark room cutting a promo about Shorty G. Great, I'm sure that's the feud we all wanted. Before Bryan enters the locker room to find Ramblin Rabbit with half of his head missing. Lovely. Roman Reigns comes out and cuts a promo saying he's going to win the Rumble and main events WrestleMania for the 5th time with the Usos by his side and some other stuff. Before the Usos come out, they say some stuff, and then King Corbin comes out and says some stuff. I mean, I'm sensing a pattern emerging here. This led into the main event match of the Usos versus King Corbin and Dolph Ziggler, which was just really confusing. The Revival came out at one point to run a distraction, so then Roman Reigns came out from the back to punch them both, but why did Roman leave in the first place if he was already out there cutting a promo with the Usos beforehand? The Revival are never seen again, and the match ends with a DQ when Reigns spears Corbin, for reasons. Before Reigns can capitalize, Robert Roode is back, and he, Ziggler, and Corbin beat down Reigns, putting him through the commentary table and burying him underneath it to end the show. So that was the show. Press the eye above my head to let us know what you thought of it, where you can choose from Smacknificent, Smacktastic, Smack Bang in the Middle, Smack Downer, and a Smack in the Face. Overall, this show was fine. I'm really liking the Bryan and Fiend story. The Miz and Morrison story was okay this week, not as good as last week. Nakamura and Strowman is what it is. The women's division is doing some fine work. Otis is a national treasure, and the Reigns-Corbin feud is fine, but it really shouldn't be main eventing every week. This show gets a smack bang in the middle. But wait, there's more! It's time for some news about Becky Lynch's WWE contract. Hot tag to me. Before we get into the news, a special thank you to the Wonderwall Brian Gallagher for being an awesome pledge hammer on Patreon. It's time for a bit of context, so gather round, kids, as I tell you the tale of the man. Towards the back end of 2018, Becky Lynch did something very few people would have ever imagined possible, and that is becoming the biggest star in the whole of WWE. She did this despite WWE's apparent lack of interest in the women's division, when Ronda Rousey's not around, of course, and to cap it all off, she won both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships in the first ever women's main event of WrestleMania, ending Ronda Rousey's undefeated run in the process. One of the major steps in becoming this megastar was rebranding herself as The Man, a gimmick she used to paint herself as the top wrestler, not just in the women's division, but in the entire company. The most miraculous part of her entire rise to the top was that it was an injury that really ignited major interest in her. Her badass invasion and subsequent accidental broken face, courtesy of Nia Jax, which forced her out of a match with Ronda Rousey at Survivor Series, made Lynch the ultimate babyface. At the time, Ronda was being booked as invincible and would likely have defeated Lynch, possibly ending the Irish Lass Kicker's momentum and any thoughts of a further push. However, her face was broken and she used it to her advantage. She went on to win the Royal Rumble and became Becky Two Belts at WrestleMania. While her run since Mania 35 has been less than thrilling as a result of WWE losing interest in the women's division since Ronda left, she is still a vital component of the women's division and still manages to get huge crowd reactions. I know that seems like a little bit of a history lesson rather than news, but it's very important to bear that all in mind when we talk about Becky Lynch reportedly not re-signing with WWE. I know, sound the alarms. Now, granted, if we were to make a list of all the people that could possibly be leaving WWE in the next couple of years, Becky Lynch would be somewhere near the bottom, considering she's been treated rather well and has now essentially become the face of the women's division whenever Ronda Rousey isn't around. I'd say she's probably quite content with her current position. Having said that, all of that would make it even more impactful if she did decide to leave. It was almost inconceivable that someone like Dean Ambrose, former WWE champion and former Shield brother Dean Ambrose, would leave WWE, and yet here we are. A report surfaced in the Wrestling Observer newsletter yesterday that Becky has signed a $1 million a year contract in 2019. However, the man herself is now refuting these claims. Becky herself took to Twitter to say, "Report not true. Haven't signed anything new in years. Deal coming up soon." Contracts do seem to be the talk of the industry lately, in promotions all over the world. And considering Becky has brought up her contract in her feud with Asuka, it's very possible this is all a work, and her denying her contract re-signing is simply to maintain continuity with the story on TV, when in fact her contract is nowhere near expiring. Becky has previously tweeted relating to her contract, saying, "It's amazing what they'll give you when you remind them your contract is coming up soon. More to say on Raw." The fact that WWE is allowing her to use her supposed lack of new deal in promos would suggest that they aren't at all worried about her not signing, and in fact Becky herself said, "New deal coming up soon." Which means that more than likely this is just maintaining kayfabe and continuity with the story presented on the screen, but the possibility still remains. Though whether she would even leave her fiancé in WWE and go elsewhere remains to be seen, when her fiancé happens to be the most WWE superstar that ever superstarred. If the reports are true, it would make Becky the second highest paid female star in WWE history behind Ronda Rousey, who reportedly earns $1.5 million a year, because she's the true star, you see. Triple H and Vince McMahon have some secret WWE plans that have supposedly been revealed. Press the video to the right to find out more, and the video below that to find out more about AEW potentially exploring a New Japan partnership. A special thank you to our pledge hammers on Patreon, some of whom you see scrolling below me right now. I've been Chopper P. Quinnell, and that was wrestling.